Okay, this is a typical setup for Tanks and Yanks. What we're looking at is a house. It has a machine gun nest in it. There's a couple of tanks in the back. And you have the listening post. You got various machine guns and K riflemen on the German side. And you also have, if I can do this, a German gun there, and gun emplacement. And there's a heavy mortar crew. There's machine gunners that are placed both in the forward and rear areas, and those in the back are companies of German soldiers. The artillery reserve and the main commander, and the other half of the company. Those are each 11 figures in this setup are a platoon. There's 4 platoons to a company. So you have two companies, actually a company and a half, and then you have our tank support, and you have another gun emplacement, and the barbed wire defenses, of course. And let me scroll back here, zoom out. And then on the American side, the board's not big enough for their trenches, but you have on the American right a task force of tanks. You have a 75mm gun. I'm still painting the crew. And then you have a company of Americans with machine guns. And then going further into the center of the American line, you have more tanks. And that's the center. And then you have more companies of Americans, and then you have 1-pound guns. Let's see if we can get out close up there. That's a 1-pound gun with a 2-man crew. And if you look over here, you have machine guns. It's 3 figures, so that's a heavy machine gun. And next to them, someplace, if I can zoom out a little here, there's another heavy machine gun, as well as tanks. I especially like the new tanks that I've done, and those are the tadpoles, which until recently I didn't know existed. And in this case, if you look here, there's a mortar crew in the back. Well, this has supplies, excuse me. Picked up the wrong one. There's one here someplace with a mortar crew in the back, so I guess I put the wrong one on the board. And then here's another machine gun nest, and with a crew of 3, so that's a heavy machine gun. And if you look down here, and if you notice, there's a 2-man crew, and the Americans will be attacking this fortification, which is primarily what I'm going to do at Siege of Augusta. Okay, don't know how good this is, but it is what it is. What I like, though, I must admit, is when you can play with the extra figures and stuff by making guys like on tanks. I almost got it in focus there. And then these smaller FTs, that's a communication tank. That's a tank with, with a 37mm gun. And you go down here, another communication tank right there. And of course there's the typical Mark 4 or 5, actually, because it's a generic term, because by this time they probably have Mark 5s. They would use the tadpoles as both supply vehicles, which would dump ammo and food and munitions of various sorts onto the battlefield as the men advanced. And as you can see, you need a lot of guys. So I try to make it as engaging as possible with the number of figures. Here's another one. I really like playing with this stuff because you can do all kinds of things with the models. Most of the figures are Blue Moon, if not all. The tanks are 1/72 plastics, which are not cheap, but they do the job. And then you have different things on the battlefield. For example, here's someplace, if I can find it, a caisson that's tipped over. These are the shell holes that I use, which are made by Precision Products out of Ozark Miniatures, I think. Going down there is another nice machine gun nest. And what I did is the 1/72 figures, if they'd ever come into focus. I hope. Maybe I gotta back out here. It must be the snow outside. There we go. You can use 1/72 figures when they're laying down, and they're pretty good for the scale. And going over here, I like to make little vignettes. If you notice, there's a K rifleman in there with the late war helmet. And then going up, you can see the ominous A7V and a captured Whippet medium tank. And there's another platoon. You can use platoons of, I wouldn't go bigger than 12 figures. And I really like the old Airfix diorama sets that they made. The only mistake I made here, the water should be a little more yellowish to show the chlorine gases that they used. And that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this. Oh, almost forgot. We use D10 die and D6 die for various movement, and almost all the casualty calculations are done with those two types of dice. And, well, let's go here a minute, seeing I'm blathering on. And this is I use those molds that you can get to make walls and towers. And those happen to be, in this case, this happens to be like a knockdown building. It's made out of plaster of Paris. And going here with a 1-pound gun. And I made the barbed wire out of floral wire. And the other barbed wire, which the Germans have, and I'm working on more, is screen. And I think I put it on the page. You can see that it's a little more realistic, although it's very difficult to get to make it stay in this circular pattern. But this way I can remove those as the tanks or the artillery blow it away, the barbed wire that is. And let's see if it'll stay focused. It's relatively focused. But it is all 15 millimeter. I do prefer 28s, but the 1/72 and 1/76 tanks work great, so that's why I went with them. Thanks.